Hi, I'm Kathleen Boswell. About 10 years ago, I learned how to weave, and I've been really enjoying it. It lets me be artistic, but then I also get to make something that's useful. Human beings are pretty smart, and when there's a problem to solve, we put our brains to work and figure it out. The earliest human beings just ran around naked or cut up animal skins and tried to cover themselves that way. But that got too hot and didn't want to do that for too long. So then they figured out if they could put little strings together and make them stay together, they could come up with something to make clothing out of. And that's what you do when you're weaving. You may have already done some weaving before if you've ever used strips of paper and put them into other strips. My yellow ones are going up and down, and then the green strips are going to go in between it. The first one I put under, over, under, over, under, over. So now this one, I'll do just the opposite, and it'll go on top of the first, over the second, under the third, and over the fourth. And so now you can see it's the opposite. If I was doing this with threads, it would make them really tight, and then they would stay together nicely and end up making fabric. So this is something that human beings have been doing for thousands of years. In December, I go to Marshall and I help with a special event called Journey Through Bethlehem, and they want me to be the weaver for that. So my husband and I made a loom just like what they would have used way back then. Remember, they didn't have saws, so if they couldn't cut up wood, they cut down skinny little trees, and then with special pins or nails at the top and bottom, they put the threads up and down and up and down. These threads that are on there are called your warp threads. So then you have to do just like with the fabric and take your yarn that you're putting into it, and you have to do the over, under on each little thread. And it goes pretty fast, but still it takes a long time because you have to do each little thread by itself. If you want a big piece of fabric, you have to make a really big frame with a lot of nails on it. So it didn't take long for human beings to decide that's a lot of work. We need something to make the threads lift up by themselves. So I have this really special loom. This was handmade in the 1850s. It came from a farm down in southern Missouri, and then that family that had had it for 100 years sold it, and a lady in Fort Scott, Kansas had it. She made a few rugs on it, but it took up the whole room where she had it in her house, and she really decided she'd rather have a bed in there instead. So she sold it to me for really cheap. When we got it, it was laying in pieces in the driveway, and we didn't even have a picture of how it was supposed to look. But my husband figured it out. This is sometimes called a barn loom because it's so big it really needs to be in your barn instead of your house. If you've read any of the Little House on the Prairie books, there's one about Almanzo and his family, and it's called Farmer Boy. One of the very first pictures in the book is a picture of his mother sitting at the loom working on some fabric that she was making to make his brother a suit of clothes. So the way this works, there's this piece hanging down and it can turn, and then these two things here are called heddles, and they have these little wires that have a tiny little eye in it. And the first thread goes in the front one, the second thread goes in the back, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, so that if you do it the right way, was taking care of the weaving for you. Every other thread is opposite. There's two pedals down below, and when you're sitting at the loom, your feet push on one pedal, and the one goes up and the other goes down, and it opens it up. And you can see it's pretty easy to put something right in between there. The threads on this are old, and this isn't a loom that I really weave on because it's so big. This probably would have been a loom that a man would do for his own business. People would bring him the old rags cut up that they want turned into a rug, and then he would weave it for them. The really fun thing about this loom is how this bench is hooked on. It only has one leg. When we first saw it, we thought it was broken, and then we realized that the metal peg over here puts it on there. So you get in, and then you can just move the seat up to where you want, and you sit and weave. As you put through the fabric, you use this thing. It's called a shuttle, just like we have the space shuttle. It takes you from one place to another. So the shuttle, with either thread or fabric on it, moves the stuff from one side to the other. So you put down the one pedal and it opens it up, and then you can slide it through, and then when you get it through to the other side, you take it out, switch feet, and smash it in there, and then you send it back and forth and back and forth, just like you did with the strips of paper. So we're going to go in the building now where it's not so hot, and I'll show you my looms there and the rugs that I'm actually working on, and some of them that I've made recently.